Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legend of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we are going to be looking at some more custom cards. Now, you may remember that I made a video a couple days ago going through the top rated posts of all time on custom LOR. So basically, what are like the best custom cards ever made? And I went through some of those submissions, but I actually kind of, skipped over one of the top submissions, which was this one, which is a Daybreak set made by zimonster. Now, the reason I did that was because, this is a set of 14 cards, and I was looking at the time of the video, and I was like, I probably don't have time to sort of, go through all of these cards. So that's why I didn't do it. But I was thinking, well, if I ever do another one, I definitely will look at this set of cards, and maybe, some others as well, look at more sets of cards rather than just one-off cards. And then it turns out that zimonster is a viewer of my channel. And so when I found that out, I was like, okay, well, I'll definitely look at this set of cards, and I will definitely look at some of their other submissions as well, because I had already seen through this little set and thought, this is really good. So we're going to look through some of zimonster's creations here, because some of them are really, really good designs, or at least the ones that I've seen so far have had some really cool, unique, interesting designs that honestly I could see coming into the game, and I think would improve the game a lot. So let's just dive in straight away. Thank you, zimonster, for all of these submissions, and yeah, let's dive in. I'm not gonna say that all of them are great, but mostly they are kind of great. So let's dive in. Sun Servant, 2 mana 2/2 support, activated my supported allies Daybreak effect. Obviously, just this is probably one of my favorite designs, to be honest, because it's just so Targon, right? It's got support, it's got Daybreak, it feels like a card, it looks like a card. That's another thing. All the arts on these cards are really good as well. And it's just a great idea. Obviously activating the Daybreak effect can get you a lot of different things. Obviously, most of you are probably thinking about, oh, would this be too good maybe with like Solaris Priestess to get a free card? But I don't think it would, and I think that it would be very Targon, right? You've got this like lower statted unit. If you wanted to use it with Solaris Priestess, then you'd have to attack with both this and Solaris Priestess, which, probably would get, 2 negative trades for you. So yes, you would have extra cards, but you'd be playing at a very low tempo, which is just so Targon, and that's why this card design is so genius and so wonderful. And I think that this would be a great addition to the game. And I don't remember. I think Leona's level up condition is that they've activated Daybreak a certain amount of times. I think. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So if this would count for one as well, then that obviously would be great as well. Yeah, just a wonderful, wonderful design. Moving on to Tiahira. Not quite sure on how you would pronounce that. The Dawn. 6 mana spell shield. When I have summoned, grant me 1/1 for each time you have activated Daybreak this game. This is something we haven't seen too much of. In Runeterra, generally, units with like just spell shield. We don't, there are some, of course, but there aren't too many with that, and particularly ones that can grow, as the game goes on. So most of the time, you'll probably be looking at like a 6 mana 6/6 with spell shield, maybe, which isn't great. It isn't terrible, but again, what I think I like about most of all of these designs is they feel like cards. Even if I don't think they're going to be great cards, like if this card was really coming out, this is the kind of card that I could almost envision them printing. This is the kind of card that, to me, makes sense as a card that they would actually make. It's something that I think the dev team are quite comfortable with this kind of effect. And, we've already got like Dusk Rider for Nightfall with this kind of effect. So it's almost a surprise that Daybreak doesn't have this kind of effect. And so, yeah. Probably not the strongest card, but again, just another card that I could see being real. Next up, we have Rahurak Alto, which is a 4 mana landmark. Round end, if you've only played one card this round, reduce the cost of your most expensive card in hand by 2, and grant your weakest ally 1 health. Now this, I'm pretty sure, is a play on the Veiled Temple. It's kind of like an inverse effect of Veiled Temple. If you've only played one card this round, instead of the multiple cards in a round, reduce the cost of your most expensive card in hand by 2, as opposed to, the Veiled Temple giving you 2 mana back, and granting your weakest ally 1 health instead of the 1 attack. The only problem I have with this card is I think that it would be broken. Basically because think about it this way, right? This plays down on 4 mana. Now, I'm not sure if it counts itself or not, but even if it doesn't, that could still be a problem, because you could, even if it doesn't count itself, so, you play the Rahurak Alto, then you can just play like a 1 mana spell on turn 4, right? And that counts. Either way, whatever counts would count. And your most expensive card would reduce by 2. Let's say that, it's a 10 mana card. Let's say it's Aurelion Sol, which is in Targon. You could very reliably get Aurelion Sol down on turn 6, which most games go to turn 6. Targon has a lot of healing anyway, and a 6 mana Aurelion Sol is obviously very, very strong. And you would often get that board state coming to pass with this card, because Aurelion Sol, even when reduced by 2 mana to be 8 mana, is still probably going to be your most expensive card in hand. And so then again, on turn 5, you would just have to play 1 card. And again, then you would reduce Aurelion Sol to 6 mana. And then on turn 6, you can slam down Aurelion Sol. And then, the board is kind of yours, and you're creating cards. And you're probably going to win. So yeah. It's kind of like, I get the idea. It's kind of an inverse Veil Temple, but there's a difference between like refilling mana and reducing costs. Because reducing costs, you can get a unit that is insanely expensive to be not very expensive very, very quickly using this. Whereas refilling mana, you can never go past what you initially had, right? And I think that that's the important difference. So this one, I actually think, is one of the few ones where this is a bit of a fail, that they would never print this card for the reasons I just said. But I kind of get where the idea has come from. Moving on to Solaris Dawnbringer, a 3 mana 3/4. When I'm summoned, create a Dawn Petal Sundrop in hand. And a Dawn Petal Sundrop is this, which is a 0 mana burst speed spell. Activate the Daybreak effect of the next card with Daybreak that you play this round. So basically, it's a way of getting Daybreak to activate, multiple times, right? So that it's not just one card around, which I think is a pretty neat idea. 3 mana 3/4 with this ability obviously would be quite strong. Obviously, we've seen the 3 mana 3/4 stat line on Ziggs be quite effective. And yeah, I think Solaris Dawnbringer, for that reason, would be a pretty strong little card. And it would kind of be a bit different. I do think that this fits more of kind of a Daybreak deck and a Leona deck, because, Leona is very mid-range, and the problem with Solaris Priestess is she has a very small stat line. And so that can kind of weaken things, whereas this would be much more kind of, playing into that mid-range kind of, kind of way, and allow you to kind of, keep developing kind of strong units, and go from there. So I do think that this would fit the deck probably better, and it would be nice to have like a Targon 3-drop for Daybreak deck. This is probably one of the kind of cards that this deck is missing the most. It might be a bit strong, but I definitely appreciate the idea, and I think it would be a pretty good card. Interesting to note, Dawn Petal Sundrop, of course, cannot be main decked, which I think is also important. But yeah, another good design. And this is the kind of design, again, that would kind of be filling the holes of what that archetype needs. I do think that archetype needs another champion with Daybreak on it. That would be the biggest help. But having like a solid 3-drop as well would be quite nice. Moving on to Sunlight Energy, a 4 mana fast speed spell with give an ally +2/+2 this round. Daybreak, activate its Daybreak effect. So 4 mana, just to give it, for 4 mana sharp sight, let's say. At fast speed as well. But Daybreak, activate its Daybreak effect. Seems pretty balanced. Some of the Daybreak effects, like a Solaris Priestess, maybe even a Ravun, that can give you a card are, quite good. I don't think that this card would see play. Personally, that's not a problem with the design of a card, of course, for custom cards. If you're building a set, not every card is going to be, super strong. But again, it seems like a card. This kind of whole design seems very much like a card that they would actually make. And so, yeah, another very solid design. Feels kind of Daybreaky, needing to play Daybreak to get a Daybreak effect. Which could be used as like a double combat trick now that I think about it as well with some of the units, which would be quite cool. So yeah, just another cool idea. And I like it. I like this kind of idea a lot. The Daybreak archetype would be helped quite a lot by quite a few of these different cards, and that's kind of what I'm looking for here. And this is another one where, Might be a bit underpowered, but I could see it. Moving on to Record Protector is a 4 mana 3/6. Daybreak, create a Heresy Persecution in hand, which is this, which is a 3 mana slow speed spell. Create a Solaris Soldier, which is the 1 mana one, I think, and a Lunari Shadestalker in hand. Lunari Shadestalker. I think that's the elusive one, right? The 2 mana 2/3. God, they all. I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure it is. And then Daybreak, stun the weakest enemy. Again, non-main deckable, so the only way you could get this would be off this thing. Again, this is probably one of the few that I have a bit of a problem with. You know, might be a bit too strong. Flavor-wise, you know, makes sense. And again, I love that it's kind of fitting in with the Targon themes here are very strong, right? I think that that's one of the key things of why a lot of these cards feel like they could be printed, is because obviously they're all Targon cards because they're Daybreak cards, but they all feel very much like they fit within what Targon is trying to do. You know, I think that that's a big thing that, you know, maybe a lot of custom cards might miss out on, is they don't think about maybe the sort of underlying themes of a region as much as they do the kind of cards that they're creating. But, you know, this being like very slow, like a 3 mana spell to like create more cards in hand that just gives you a stun. Like, this is, you know, very Targon to be like this, you know, this is a very slow effect that's not going to, you know, really pay off unless you know, have a pretty decent control of the game and, you know, you can sort of sit back and wait a bit. My only problem, as I said, would be from a power level angle. We know how strong 4 mana 3/5s can be. You know, Shen has been a good example for a long time, but then, you know, more recently lecturing Yordle, I think, you know, I was very quick on that, but, you know, I think other people now have sort of caught on, like, oh, you know, this 4 mana 3/5 stat line, like, is really hard to remove, and, you know, this card will often trade into a lot of different things. I don't even want to think about a 4 mana 3/6 because I think that would really go a long way. We've seen 6 health on like a Trundle, which I know had regeneration, but like 6 health can just shut down a board completely. And so on turn 4, 6 health, you know, with 3 attack. Again, I've mentioned this before, that like 3 is kind of an important number. If this was a 2/6, it'd be fine, but as a 3/6, I don't think that they would ever go for a stat line like this unless it was like a blank card. So yeah, I think if this was, I mean, this might be a bit strong even as a 3/5, to be honest, because it's giving you a card that then gives you 2 other cards, which is very slow, but you got to stun. I don't know. Yeah, I just don't think it would be a 3/6. But otherwise, again, kind of fitting the Targon themes very well. I'm not. I guess it's a persecution, so that's why you create the Lunari Shadestalker. That does make some sense, I guess. And I am kind of interested. We've seen recently with what's it called, Heavens Aligned. There's a spell that, you know, gives you either a Daybreak or a Nightfall card, and that's kind of the first really, like, you know, kind of card that's like putting them together in a way. You know, a deck where you could potentially build both together. I would be interested to see if they are going to explore that theme a bit more, and this obviously would again be kind of doing that, which again I think would be pretty interesting. Moving on to Sunlight Arrow, a 2 mana 2/2. When you activate another Daybreak, deal 1 to the weakest enemy. I mean, seems like a pretty strong card, right? You know, what would be like a threat that your opponent would need to remove. This is kind of interesting because this might take Daybreak away. You know, this card might take Daybreak in a different direction. You know, I feel like the Leona Daybreak is very mid-range and should mostly be played as a mid-range deck. But this is the kind of card that, you know, maybe you could see, you know, more of a Daybreak controlled kind of thing coming in, you know, where you really try and, you know, control the board with this kind of card. And those kind of cards always fascinate me. You know, if you can take an archetype and go, you know, this archetype, you know, because Daybreak is kind of like mid-range, which is kind of slower mid-range, you know, it's Targon, so it's a bit slower than like maybe most mid-range decks might be. And so you give them a card that goes, well, you can either stick with the mid-range or if you want, or you can kind of go more into the slower thing. This, again, is the kind of design that I think is kind of genius, you know? Mix things up a bit. You know, this is, it's not a control card necessarily, but it very easily can become a control card. And I think if that were to be the case, that gives you a complete new sphere for Daybreak to exist in. I think that would be very interesting. And so, you know, you'd still need to be in a lot of Daybreaks. You'd still probably be playing like Leona and whatever, and a lot of the Daybreak cards. But potentially you could, you know, turn them into a slower deck. You know, you wouldn't be playing the Zenith Blades or any, you know, Morning Glories or anything like that. You know, you'd be playing for the stuns. You'd be playing for, you know, basically just slowing everything down and using Sunlight Arrow to just help pick off your opponents. You know, again, could work pretty well with like a Swain Daybreak kind of deck. I think that that would, you know, make a lot of sense for this kind of card, because obviously it deals 1, then you can get your Flux off and things like that as well. So a really cool design that, again, would just help push Daybreak in different directions, and that could be something that, of all the cards, I think that this is the one that I would want to see, because then I could really imagine a Daybreak Swain deck making, you know, a lot more sense just from this card alone. Forbidden Lovers, a 2-mana 3/2, Daybreak or Nightfall, create an Eclipse in hand. So pretty much, is there a way you can't activate one of these? I kind of get like why you need both for like, you know, the kind of theme of the card, but is there a way that you could have neither? I don't think so, right? But either way, an Eclipse is a 1-mana fast speed spell. Choose a Daybreak and Nightfall card in hand. Swap their activations. So again, this is playing on the themes much more of, you know, combining the two, which, as I say, is an interesting idea to explore because we haven't really seen it as much. But what two things would you want to swap? In my head, like Doom Beast would be a pretty good one to swap. You know, because sometimes, like, because that's just one of those effects that you probably want, like, here and now. You know, if you need that health, you need the health. Give it to me now on Daybreak. So I could definitely see that. In terms of Daybreak cards that want Nightfall, I'm not too sure about that one, to be honest. Like, I guess it could work with really any of them. It doesn't seem as important, I think. To pay 1 mana for this is a bit odd, and I think this would be burst speed. You know, I think this kind of effect would be burst speed because, you know, kind of something that your opponent probably doesn't need to worry about too much. That's probably the only thing I'd change, is make it burst speed, but I do like the idea of trying to make, you know, the two decks combine a bit more than they initially do. I think that would be quite an interesting concept to play around with, and maybe one day we'll see that, you know, as maybe the devs will push that more on us. We will see, though. Then we have 2 halves of the same circle, which is a 2-mana burst speed spell. Draw 1. For the rest of the round, your Daybreak cards are Nightfall instead. Now, this one makes a lot more sense, right? And again, could play much more into the kind of, maybe more, I'm not going to say control, but kind of, you know, that slower mid-range kind of thing. You know, say you've got, like, you know, you've been controlling out the game, you know, but now you've got a hand full of, like, you know, 4 Daybreak cards, and you could play them all in one turn, but then you're not getting the Daybreak effect from them. Well, now you can, right? And the fact this is a draw 1 as well, like that's important. You know, the fact this is, you know, playing on that 2-mana burst speed draw 1 that we've seen in quite a few different cards now, you know, means that it's never a useless card. It's always at least just a cycle. And also, obviously, if you draw 1 and you pick up a Daybreak card, for the rest of the round, it's a Nightfall instead, so don't worry about it. You'll get the effect. So makes a lot of sense. Would be interesting to see, you know, again, this obviously would be played in the sort of combination deck, and this is the kind of card that would enable that, right? Because I'm assuming that if you played a bunch of Daybreak cards then and then attacked with them, that like that would count for like a Nocturne level up, you know, that would count for a Diana because they are now Nightfall instead. I think that's how it would probably work. Which would be quite interesting, right? That's kind of an interesting, unique kind of way you might want to build a deck in a slightly different way. Like, I like a lot of these cards because they enable, you know, basically this has taken one of the most boring archetypes. It's taken one of the most boring archetypes in the game and said, well, here's a bunch of different ways you could play with this instead. And I think that it kind of goes to show the sort of limits that we could have in Runeterra, that there could be a lot of expansion in a lot of these deck ideas, and, you know, like certain things like Tonken Shiraka or Lurk, you know, these very linear kind of decks that just smash together and are kind of, you know, very linear. You know, maybe we could find, you know, different avenues for them that might even be the same champions, you know, might be a lot of the same cards, but just with 1 or 2 like different cards. You know, you can just like go, well, what if you turned into this deck instead? You know, what if, for instance, like Tonken Shiraka, right? They have like the Star Shepherd that can grow quite a lot. What if there was a couple other cards like that where, you know, all of a sudden Tonken Shiraka could be played as like a more beatdown deck? You know, things like that. you know, that only really take a couple cards, can vastly change how an archetype is played. And so that's what I like about a lot of these cards. Moving on to Daylight. Is this meant to be Ancient, I assume? Or did we miss an N off here? Either way. 2 mana Overwhelm, round end. If you only played 1 card this round, grant me 1 attack. Daybreak, give me 2 attack this round. So, I need to think about this. So, Daybreak. So it comes down as a 2 mana 2/4 with Overwhelm, but only for that round. And then round end, if you've only played 1 card, then it gains 1 attack. So it's going to slowly just grow and grow and grow, which I wish there were more cards like that in the game, to be honest. Particularly, like, you know, we've seen it with landmarks, but I do wish there was sort of more units that, you know, and this is a good way of balancing this, right? Because you're not getting a completely useless card on turn 2. And I think that that's often what a lot of these cards in Runeterra can miss, is, you know, that particularly older versions of this card, like, wouldn't have this Daybreak part, and it would just say this, and it would be a completely useless card. But because this has this Daybreak effect on it, you know, that makes it a lot less of a useless card. And I think that obviously it's very much playing into the Daybreak themes. It makes a lot of sense as a card. You know, by round, 5, you'll have a 3/4. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's a great card, but it's okay. And I kind of like it. I almost wish this was like 1 mana and this was like just gain 1 attack instead. Because that could be quite interesting. Like, you just have this growing threat as a 1 mana card. I kind of like that. Might be too good at that point, but, you know, who cares? But yeah, a really nice, cool design as well. And finally, for the Daybreak cards, we have Rahurak Militia, which is Daybreak, or when you activate another Daybreak, give me +2/+1 this round, which obviously we have seen on a bunch of kind of different cards. So this would turn it into a 3/4. It wouldn't be a good card, of course, but this is kind of, you know, playing with the other themes in the set of potentially activating Daybreak multiple times, which obviously would then raise its stats again and again and again. We've seen quite a few of these cards, and we've seen those kind of cards never be great. So it probably wouldn't be great, but again, looks very much like a card that could see, you know, I wouldn't say could see play, could see print, could, you know, be in the game, and I would not be surprised at all. So overall, this set, I mean, you can understand why it's one of the highest rated sets. Some of the ideas here are super cool. You know, I do think there's, you know, some slight balance issues with some of them, but, you know, that's very minor nitpick overall. Because most of these are just really, really, really good ideas, and I'm sure most of you probably agree. My favorite ones, I would say, are probably Sun Servant, and what is it? Sunlight. This card I love. Like this, seriously, if I could get 1 card in the game, it might be this one, because I kind of love that card. Yeah, those two, and I do also like this one as well. 2 halves of the same circle. I think this is a really cool design as well. And not to say that the others aren't. Pretty much all of them are good ideas, I think. But yeah, those were just some of my favorites. And so that will be all from me today. A great set of cards that we have seen here from Zimonster, who, you know, as I said, kind of just alerted this to me in the comments of a video. So maybe, you know, you have some custom cards out there that you would like me to look at as well. I do think that this one does a particularly good job of kind of filling a lot of the holes of Daybreak and kind of, you know, making it more interesting and maybe unique. Because I think Daybreak is kind of tame. So this is kind of just an example of how easy it could be, you know, to take perhaps one of the most dull archetypes in the game and make it perhaps one of the more interesting ones in the game as well. So very well done for that, Zimonster. And yeah, I will potentially, you know, be doing more sets of cards from people, maybe even Zimonster again, who I know has some other good sets of cards out there for me to potentially look at. But this one, again, was running just a tad long, so I might just break it up again into more. But thank you so much for, you know, allowing me to do this, for talking about it, for giving me content to talk about. But yes, a very good card set here for Daybreak. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and have a really nice day.